On my 21st birthday, my parents presented me with a detailed invoice totaling $137,000, demanding payment within 24 hours, or I'd be forced to leave. I watched Dad swap out the locks as Mom tossed trash bags filled with my belongings onto the front yard. Tucker stood in the doorway, silent, watching it all unfold. Mom shouted that I was a useless leech, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. That was 5 years ago. Yesterday, I made a single phone call, and now Tucker's voicemails are filled with frantic rants about legal battles, financial ruin, and how they're losing everything. Let me rewind, because this has been brewing for 5 years, and you need to know why I took the steps I did. My grandparents were the ones who truly raised me. From the moment I could understand language, my parents made it clear that Tucker was their pride and joy, while I was the unwanted burden. Tucker got brand new cars, a fully funded college education, and lavish family trips. I got a second-hand bike from a yard sale and was told to be thankful for it. At 16, my grandparents passed away in a tragic accident, and I learned they'd left me their entire estate. Their home, their business, their savings, everything. My parents were named trustees until I turned 25, because my grandparents knew exactly what kind of people they were. My parents moved into the house the month after the funeral and started treating the business as their own. I was still in high school, and no one bothered to explain what a trust was or what rights I had. All I knew was that my grandparents intended for me to inherit everything, and my parents were supposed to manage it until I was ready. But their resentment kicked in immediately. Mom would make snide remarks about how I'd robbed them of their rightful inheritance, claiming my grandparents always favored me and were now stripping away their future. Dad, after a few drinks, would ramble about how the estate should have gone to them, the actual children. Tucker picked up their attitude and started treating me like dirt too. I became the family's punching bag for every issue. Business not doing well? Somehow my fault. Tucker crashed his car. Clearly, I'd caused the family stress that led to it. When I turned 18, I moved into college dorms, relying on student loans because my parents claimed the trust didn't cover my education, a lie I later discovered. They were supposed to use trust funds for my schooling and living expenses, but instead, they siphoned it all into their own accounts and Tucker's extravagant lifestyle. I didn't know any of this back then. I was just trying to make it through college. The real nightmare hit when I turned 21. I came home for my birthday because Mom called, saying they wanted to celebrate in a special way. I naively thought things might be improving. I was wrong. When I arrived, they were seated at the dining table with Tucker. Dad pushed a folder toward me and told me to open it. Inside was a meticulous ledger of every expense since my birth. Hospital fees, diapers, food, clothes, school supplies, even holiday gifts and summer programs, all totaling $137,000. Dad said this was what I owed them for raising me. Since I was set to inherit my grandparents' estate, they expected me to repay every cent they'd spent on me. He gave me 24 hours to either sign over the estate or come up with a payment plan. If I didn't, I'd be out of their house. I thought it was a sick joke at first and laughed, which infuriated Dad. He stood up, yelling that I was an ungrateful thief who'd been mooching off them my whole life. He ranted about how my grandparents had betrayed them by leaving everything to me, how I didn't deserve any of it. Mom joined in, complaining about the sacrifices she'd made raising me, only to be repaid with ingratitude. Tucker sat there smirking, saying I should just hand over the assets because it was the family thing to do. I refused to sign anything or pay for their bare minimum parenting. Dad's face turned crimson. He told me I had until noon the next day to pack my things and leave. Then he went outside and I heard the drill. He was changing the locks that very night on my 21st birthday. I called a friend and slept on his couch. The next morning, I returned with my friend and his truck to collect my belongings. Mom was already tossing my stuff onto the lawn, clothes, books, my laptop, all stuffed into garbage bags. Some items were damaged. My laptop screen was shattered and boxes of childhood mementos had been left out in the rain. Neighbors watched the spectacle, and Mrs. Blair from next door recorded it on her phone. Mom screamed that I was a worthless freeloader who drained them dry. Dad stood on the porch, threatening to call the police if I ever came back. Tucker helped load some of my things into the truck and told me I'd made my bed and now had to lie in it. I spent the next week in a daze. Still in college, broke, and reliant on student loans, I had no clue how to handle the trust or my grandparents' estate. I knew I'd gain control at 25, but I didn't know my rights in the interim or if my parents could somehow cut me out. I found a lawyer offering free consultations. She reviewed the will and trust documents and explained the situation. My grandparents had ensured my parents couldn't touch the principal. They could only use the income, and even that was meant for my benefit until I was 25. My parents had been breaching the trust's terms for years. But there was a catch. I couldn't act until I turned 25 when the trust dissolved. Until then, my parents were the trustees, and short of proving blatant fraud, I couldn't remove them. The lawyer said I could sue them after 25 for violating their fiduciary duties, and I'd likely win given their obvious misuse of funds. But it would cost money I didn't have and drag on for years in court. So I decided to bide my time. I'd let them believe they'd won, let them enjoy living in my house, running my business and spending my money. When I turned 25, I'd take back everything they thought was theirs. I blocked their numbers and cut all contact. Tucker tried reaching out a few times that first year, sending messages about how I was tearing the family apart and how Mom was devastated. I ignored them. I was done. I graduated college, landed a software development job, moved to another city, and lived frugally in a studio apartment, saving every penny. I documented every trust violation I could recall, keeping copies of any financial records I could access. I prepared. I turned 25 last March. The trust was supposed to dissolve automatically, and my lawyer sent the paperwork to my parents' attorney. Instead of complying, their lawyer responded, claiming I'd forfeited my inheritance by cutting contact and abandoning my interest in the trust, an absurd claim with no legal basis. It showed me they were ready to fight, genuinely believing they could keep it all. My lawyer filed a petition with the probate court, requesting a full accounting of trust assets and income for the past 9 years and an immediate transfer of everything to me. The hearing was set for this month. In the meantime, I did some research. I discovered my parents had taken out a massive mortgage on the house, expanded the business with loans, and bought Tucker a condo with business funds. They'd been living far beyond the business's actual revenue, piling up debt on assets they didn't own. I turned 26 last week. The court hearing was on Wednesday. I attended with my lawyer. My parents and Tucker showed up with their attorney. They seemed stunned to see me, as if they thought I'd just vanish. The judge reviewed the will, trust documents, and the accounting my parents were forced to provide, which revealed years of misused funds. My lawyer presented evidence of their breaches of fiduciary duty. The judge was unimpressed with their defense. He ruled entirely in my favor, full asset transfer effective immediately. The house, the business, all accounts. He also noted that my parents owed me an accounting of all income they'd taken from the trust and that I could sue them for damages in civil court. Their lawyer argued they deserved compensation for improving the property and business. The judge dismissed it, stating they were trustees, not owners, with no claim to anything. Mom broke down in tears in the courtroom. Dad's face flushed with rage, looking like he might lash out. Tucker just stared at me. I said nothing to them and left with my lawyer. Yesterday, I called the mortgage company, informing them I was the legal owner and wanted details on the loan my parents had taken. They said it was 3 months delinquent. I told them I hadn't authorized it and wouldn't cover their debt, directing them to contact my parents about the default. Next, I called the landlord of the business's new, larger location, explaining I wasn't honoring leases signed without my consent. Then I contacted the bank holding the business accounts, showed them the court order, and had everything frozen pending transfer to accounts in my name. My phone exploded with calls within hours. Tucker, then Mom, then Dad. I didn't answer but listened to the voicemails. Tucker's first message was a tirade about how I was ruining the family business and had no right to destroy it. Later messages grew desperate, mentioning frozen accounts, vendors demanding payment, and mortgage default notices. This morning, Tucker left a voicemail that was oddly satisfying. He was frantic, yelling about lawyers, bankruptcy, and Mom's breakdown, demanding I call him back. I'm not calling. I'm not fixing their mess. They made their choice 5 years ago when they threw me out. They chose to steal from me for 9 years. Now they're learning the house they live in, the business they run, the cars they drive. None of it was ever theirs. I'm meeting a business lawyer tomorrow to decide what to do with the company. I might sell it or shut it down. I haven't decided. I also need to figure out what to do about the house, since they're still living there and I have every right to evict them. Part of me wonders if I'm going too far. Then I remember standing on that lawn, watching Mom hurl my belongings while calling me a leech. I remember Dad changing the locks, Tucker's smug expression, and every day of the past 5 years scraping by while they lived in luxury on my money. No, I'm not being too harsh. I'm being exactly harsh enough. Update 1. You asked for an update, and here it is. Things haven't calmed down. If anything, they've escalated in ways I didn't expect. The voicemails kept coming after my last post. Tucker left about 15 over 2 days, Mom left several, and Dad left one, just heavy breathing for 30 seconds before hanging up. I didn't respond but listened to gauge their mindset. Tucker's messages followed a pattern. First fury, accusing me of destroying the family business and putting people out of work. Then bargaining, offering to negotiate a fair split. Then sheer panic, begging me to call because his fiancée, Sophia, was asking questions he couldn't answer. That's when I learned Tucker was engaged, news to me after 5 years of no contact. Apparently, he proposed 6 months ago, planning a big spring wedding funded partly by Sophia's wealthy parents. Now he's panicking because he can't explain the family's financial collapse. Mom's voicemails were mostly sobbing, claiming I was killing her with stress, that Dad's health was deteriorating, that Tucker's relationship was at risk, and that I was tearing the family apart over money. She genuinely believes they're the victims, that they raised me and managed the estate, and I'm the ungrateful one stealing their lives. They've rewritten history to paint themselves as wronged. On Monday, I answered one of Tucker's calls, not out of guilt but curiosity. He picked up instantly, asking if I realized the chaos I'd caused. I said I knew exactly what I'd done. I'd reclaimed what was legally mine. He argued it wasn't that simple, that Mom and Dad had built the business for 9 years, and I was swooping in to take it. I asked if he knew the business was always meant to be mine, that my grandparents left it to me, and my parents were only temporary stewards. He paused, then said that's not how things work in reality, that I'd abandoned the family, forcing them to make decisions without me. I pressed him about the mortgage on the house, the business loans, the condo bought with trust funds. He called them family investments, claiming they'd planned to include me eventually if I'd been reasonable. I said I'd been reasonable for 5 years, waiting for what was mine. He called me cruel, saying Mom was barely coping, Dad wasn't sleeping, and asked if I wanted to ruin them. Then he revealed Sophia's parents were asking questions after Dad got drunk at a dinner and ranted about disloyal kids and stolen legacies. Sophia's dad, some high-powered executive, started digging into the business and property, and Tucker was scrambling to deflect. He said Sophia was questioning his family's stability, and if I didn't stop, his engagement might collapse. I asked if he remembered watching Mom throw my stuff out 5 years ago, telling me I'd made my choice. He said that was different, that I'd been stubborn and they were teaching me family duty. I hung up. Then things took a turn. Tucker told Sophia a twisted version of events, painting me as the greedy villain trying to steal the whole inheritance from our hardworking parents. Sophia, unaware of the truth, believed him. Then she called me. I'm not sure how she got my number, likely from Tucker's messages. On Tuesday night, she introduced herself as Tucker's fiancée and said she hoped to resolve this without destroying everyone. I asked what Tucker had told her. She shared his story, that I'd been given part of an inheritance and was now maliciously trying to take everything, driven by spite. I set her straight, explaining the will, the trust, my parents' theft, the fake bill, the eviction, and the court ruling in my favor because their actions were illegal. Sophia went silent, then said she needed to process it and talk to Tucker. She thanked me for my honesty but sounded torn, caught between 2 conflicting stories. The next day, Tucker called, livid, saying I had no right to talk to Sophia and poison her with lies. He said she was doubting everything, and her parents wanted a meeting with our parents to discuss the family drama before the wedding, a meeting he couldn't allow. He offered to let me have 20% of the business profits if I dropped everything and let them keep the house and company. I asked why I'd settle for 20% of what I already own. He called me unreasonable, proof I'd always been difficult. Then Mom got on the phone. She must have been with him. Sobbing, she asked why I was ruining Tucker's life, insisting he was innocent, just a kid when the trust was created and didn't deserve to lose his fiancée. I said Tucker wasn't innocent. He'd watched them mistreat me for years and benefited from their theft, including his condo. Mom called me bitter, holding on to old grudges, and said Tucker had always admired me as his big brother. I nearly laughed, reminding her how he'd stood by smugly as they threw me out. She claimed I was distorting everything, that I'd cut them off and forced them to move on without me. Dad got on next, calm but chilling. He said we should meet face-to-face to sort this out like adults, that there were misunderstandings we could resolve as a family. I said the court had already resolved it, everything was mine. He argued the court didn't know the full story, that they'd poured years into the business and house, deserving some moral claim. I asked if morals included kicking me out with a fake $137,000 bill. He said the bill was real based on actual costs. I hung up. Then things got messier. The business employs 12 people, and I hadn't considered them, focused only on my parents and Tucker. Freezing the account stopped payroll, and on Thursday, the office manager, Hannah, called me. She'd gotten my number from the bank while investigating the freeze. She was polite but stressed, explaining that 12 employees hadn't been paid, vendors were chasing overdue invoices, and my parents weren't answering her calls. She needed clarity. I explained I was the legal owner, that my parents had mismanaged the trust, and I was reviewing options. She asked about payroll. I said I'd look into it but needed to see the books first, suspecting financial mismanagement. Hannah revealed the business had been struggling for a year. Cash flow issues, costly expansion, loans piling up. She urged me to give notice if I planned to close it, as many employees had families. I hadn't decided to shut it down yet, but now I had to consider 12 livelihoods alongside my parents' debts. My lawyer advised hiring an accountant to review everything, warning that as the owner, I'd be liable for the debts. Bankruptcy might protect me, but would cost the employees their jobs. I'm achieving my goal of hitting my parents financially, but innocent people are caught in the crossfire. Hannah emailed me the employee list. Some have been there nearly as long as my parents. On Friday, Tucker showed up at my apartment looking wrecked, like he hadn't slept. I don't know how he got my address. He said Sophia's parents were delaying the wedding after learning about the court case, questioning his family's stability. Sophia was doubting him too. He begged me to sign over the business, let our parents buy the house over time, and take a cash settlement. I asked why I'd do that. He said because we're family, because mom and dad raised me, because he's my brother and I was ruining his life. I reminded him they'd made their choice 5 years ago. He called me petty, holding a grudge too long, and said I should be the bigger person. I told him to leave. He stood there, then walked away. Now it's Saturday and I have 17 new voicemails, moms using different numbers, Tucker's called 6 times, and even Sophia left one, asking to talk again. The accountant reviews the books Monday. Eviction papers for the house are being prepared. I'm torn about the employees, but keep reminding myself my parents created this mess with their greed and mismanagement. I'm not backing down, but this is getting more complicated than I expected. Update 2, the accountant finished the books, and it's worse than I imagined, far worse. A new twist has made this even more chaotic. She spent Monday digging through the records and called Tuesday, insisting we meet in person. At her office, papers covered her desk. She laid it out. The business is underwater. My parents took out 3 loans over 4 years to fund an expansion, new equipment, and more staff, but revenue never kept up. They've been juggling debts, using new loans to pay old ones. The house has a $180,000 mortgage, 4 months delinquent. The business owes $220,000 in loans and credit lines, with 6 months of unpaid vendor invoices. The checking account has $1,100. Financed equipment payments are behind too. Then came the infuriating part. The trust income, meant for my benefit until 25, was being skimmed. $4,000 a month in personal withdrawals on top of their salaries for 9 years. That's over $400,000 they stole, which should have covered my education or living expenses. Instead, I took out loans while they funded their lifestyle and Tucker's condo. The accountant said I could sue for that money, but collecting would be tough since they'll have no assets soon. So I own a bankrupt business and a house in foreclosure, some inheritance. The accountant gave me 2 options: restructure with my own money with no guarantee of profit, or let it fail through bankruptcy, protecting me from most debts but killing the jobs. I chose bankruptcy. It's harsh, but I'm not sinking my savings into their mess. I called Hannah and told her. She was surprisingly calm, saying she'd seen it coming. My parents ignored her financial warnings. She mentioned Dad's odd behavior over the past year, impulsive, aggressive, spending recklessly. Mom always deflected questions about it. That aligned with Dad's strange voicemail and Tucker's story of him drunkenly ranting. Maybe something's wrong with him, but it doesn't erase 9 years of theft and abuse. I filed for bankruptcy Wednesday. Hannah offered to tell the employees, though I volunteered. She said it was better coming from her since she knew them. I sent 2 weeks severance for everyone from my savings, not much but something. Then Tucker and Sophia's situation escalated. Sophia called Wednesday night, saying she'd ended the engagement. She couldn't marry someone who'd lied about something so major. Her parents, after researching the court case, urged her to walk away, citing Tucker's lies, financial instability, and family chaos. She'd asked him to go to counseling. He refused, insisting I was the problem. That scared her. He wouldn't own his role. She felt bad but relieved to know before the wedding. I apologized for her being dragged into this. She said she was sorry too, but glad to learn the truth. Sophia then asked if my parents had always mistreated me. I said yes. She revealed Tucker had claimed we were a tight-knit family until I got greedy about the inheritance. My honesty made her see how easily he lied. I felt for her. She's a good person caught in his mess. Tucker showed up Thursday, drunk and pounding on my door. I didn't open it. He screamed that I'd ruined his life, that Sophia was his everything, and I'd taken her away. I shouted back that she left because he lied, not because of me. He accused me of turning her against him. I said she learned the truth. He ranted about Mom's new medication, Dad's lack of sleep, and the business closure ending their income, blaming me for it all. I opened the door and told him this was about consequences for their actions, not revenge. He claimed they'd raised me, fed me, housed me, and the bill was a mistake born of fear. I laughed, saying if raising a kid without abuse deserves eternal gratitude, they shouldn't have had kids. He called me garbage and left. Friday morning, Mom called, barely coherent, saying Tucker was suicidal, showing up at 3 a.m. scaring them, talking about his life being over. She said if anything happened to him, it'd be my fault. I told her Tucker's a grown man responsible for himself, and if she's worried, get him help. She called me heartless, saying he's my brother. I said he stopped being my brother when he watched them throw me out. She screamed that I was a monster, that she'd raised me, and I was destroying her family over money. I said my grandparents would be ashamed of her, not me, for stealing what they left to protect me. She hung up. Then Uncle Jonah, Dad's brother, called, someone I hadn't spoken to in a decade. Dad had told him everything, and he wanted my side. I explained the will, trust, theft, eviction, and court ruling. He listened, then said he'd always wondered why my grandparents left everything to me. He thought it was our bond, but now suspected they saw Dad's entitlement. He asked what I wanted. I said justice and consequences. He said that was fair, but asked if I wanted lifelong estrangement. I said they chose that when they threw me out. He asked if I'd forgive someone who stole that much from me. He admitted he wasn't sure, but urged me to consider if this was worth it. I thought about it. It is worth it. This isn't just about money, it's about being treated as worthless my whole life. My grandparents protected me with the trust, knowing my parents would exploit me. Now the business is gone, the house is in foreclosure, Tucker's engagement is over, and he's unraveling. Mom's medicated, Dad's acting off, and Uncle Jonah thinks I'm too harsh. But I'm not done. Final update: the eviction papers were served Tuesday. Tucker called within an hour, panicked, saying the sheriff delivered them and Dad collapsed, requiring an ambulance. He begged me to stop before someone died. I said Dad's collapse wasn't my doing. Tucker called me cruel, saying their actions didn't justify causing Dad a heart attack. I said it was his own stress, not the papers. He hung up. My lawyer confirmed the papers were served, giving them 30 days to vacate unless they contest it. He doubted they would, given their legal loss and lack of funds. Dad didn't have a heart attack, just a panic attack. Tucker called the next day, saying Dad was home with anxiety meds, shaking and saying he'd failed everyone. Tucker said they had nowhere to go, apartments were rejecting them due to bad credit. They'd likely end up in a rough area. He said it like I should feel guilty, but I thought of my years in a tiny apartment while they lived in my house. Mom called Thursday, calm but drained, asking to meet in person to explain things I didn't understand. Curious, I agreed to meet at the house Saturday. She sounded relieved. When I arrived, the house looked neglected, overgrown lawn, peeling paint. Tucker's and Uncle Jonah's cars were there, which surprised me. Tucker opened the door looking haggard and let me in silently. The house was a mess, cluttered, stale, furniture worn. My inheritance ruined. Mom, Dad, Tucker, and Uncle Jonah were in the living room. Jonah said he was there to mediate. Mom apologized, admitting the bill and eviction were wrong, driven by fear of losing the estate. Dad said they'd built a good life, and giving it to me who'd earned nothing felt unfair. Mom said my grandparents disapproved of how they'd treated me, favoring Tucker because he was easier, successful, while I was difficult, withdrawn. They thought I needed tough love. My grandparents saw it as neglect, so they left everything to me. Tucker agreed, believing their treatment was normal. Uncle Jonah asked my thoughts. I said they were delusional. Tough love doesn't include theft or abandonment. Mom called me oversensitive, saying I turned out fine despite being difficult. I said I succeeded despite them, thanks to my grandparents. Dad claimed they'd provided basics, deserving credit. I said that's the bare minimum, not an achievement. Tucker called me stubborn, refusing their apology. I said I heard it but didn't buy their excuses. Mom sobbed, saying she'd done her best, loved me despite my difficulty. Dad said they'd gotten attached to the house and business, making plans only to face losing it all. Jonah suggested a middle ground, more time to move, financial help, rebuilding ties. I said I wanted consequences, not reconciliation. Tucker apologized, saying Sophia's departure made him see the family's flaws, but admitted his condo was being foreclosed. I asked if he'd repay the stolen funds. He said he couldn't get a job without references. Mom begged for the house, sobbing. Dad left the room. Tucker followed me out, saying I destroyed them and asking if I was happy. I said I was done, not happy or unhappy. He called me cold, saying I'd become as bad as them. I asked what that made them for starting this. He had no answer. The eviction proceeds next week. They're moving into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, Mom, Dad, and Tucker together. The house will be sold to cover the mortgage, with little left for me. Uncle Jonah called, disappointed I chose revenge over being the bigger person. I said my grandparents protected me from this manipulation. Tucker left a crying voicemail today. Part of me felt it, but I remembered his smugness 5 years ago. He's crying over consequences, not remorse. They're packing, moving, starting over with nothing after 9 years of living off my inheritance. I'm watching it unfold as I planned 5 years ago, standing on that lawn, vowing to take it all back. They made their choice. Now they live with it.